Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to Raw Retro here on AI Pro. I'm podcasting to you from a field full of angry and loud cattle, so bear that in mind. It is still quite a beautiful version of rural Ireland, however, and I'm Trev Downey, joining me to give their immediate reactions. Not so immediate, really. To Liverpool 5, Alaves 4 in the UEFA Cup final from the Westfalen Stadium in Dortmund are Dave Hendrick and Hari Sethi. Dave, I mean, the contrast between this one and the last one we did is mental. What I did find frustrating was I could not find a full version of the match with English commentary. So I was watching, I watched a French one and a Spanish one. And in the end, it's weird how central to the experience that was when we did the last one. The Barry Davies commentary actually coloured quite a lot of our reflections. So it's a bit of a loss, this one, I have to say, in terms of that. For me, maybe you guys were able to dig up something different. So I found myself watching highlights packages with English commentary quite regularly and doing a lot of reading and reading match reports and finding that a little bit more interesting. Do you know what I mean about the centrality of the commentary? It's no wonder we talk about it on Raw so often.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. We do talk about it on Raw a lot in terms of, you know, how poor the commentators are now when compared to the likes of, you know, of Barry Davies and John Motson and people like that, who were these wonderful commentators in the 70s and 80s and 90s who could, like you said, colour a game, who had come from that radio background, so were used to being descriptive in their commentary, and still did their commentary as if they were doing it on the radio and they were describing everything. Whereas now you listen to Martin Tyler and he's like, well, you've got eyes, you can see what's going on yourself, so I'm just going to call in certain moments. It's why I actually enjoy now listening to foreign commentary that I don't understand, because they just seem to get far more excited and I have no idea what they're saying. I said to you before, I found this Arabic streaming service that had wonderful commentary that I had no fucking clue what they were saying, but they were so excited by everything that was going on, it actually improved the game. But I do know what you mean for this one, because it's still of that era, and having done the Barry Davies one the last time, it was quite a jolting change. But for me, because I've watched quite a lot of games over the last couple of years with commentary that I didn't understand, it didn't really put me off all that much.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because, you know, I'm going to be kind of relying on yourself and Harry for the usual analysis without maybe being in the position I usually am myself, because I found it a weird experience. Harry, this is the first of these for you, man. And we have to address this straight out the gap, because actually it was part of the discussion either on or off mic at the end of the last one when we were trying to work out what we do next. And I think, God bless him, Dave was picking this one because it was a comparatively modern match, and you're a comparatively young man when you're in the same group as myself and himself. And again, there's a gap there even between us. So, I mean, what kind of age are you talking about you were when this game was going on? Because it's 21 years ago, man, right?
This is 2001, right? Yeah, so I was, what was I going to say? I was 10 years old.
Okay, that's not too bad. So you're happily aware of everything that's going on, because we did the last one. I was too young to know what was going on in 77, 78 was my first game. Jim, however, had sort of memories of it and was aware and had been watching football for a season or so. But you're talking about 10-year-old Jews. You're obviously in full football fan mode at that point. So that's going to be an interesting kind of take, because when you go back and revisit those things that you do have strong memories of, sometimes it's a very, very different experience than you actually remembered. And I wondered, as you reviewed this game, I mean, for me, that game just meant chaos. That's how I recall that game. Utter chaos. And I was fucking annoyed, Harry. I was annoyed because it was like we were chucking away an opportunity at every single chance we could. I really wanted us to get that treble over the line. As you reviewed it, was it calm? Because I found all that anxiety and annoyance rebuilding in me as I was watching this game again.
Yeah, I think there was a sense of calm just because obviously the result and that it ends in a happy story. But it's difficult, as we were watching it, as I was watching it, I found it really hard not to try and apply the standards I think we've gotten used to applying to looking at games together. Certainly over the past few years, being in a really lucky position to watch, the way in which the current Liverpool team has evolved and sort of the level which they're playing at, some of the world class footballers that we're talking about who set their own standards. And there's bits in this game where, whether it be just a complete lack of interest in keeping the ball, whether it be sort of just I'd almost forgotten sort of that Westerveld, if you didn't know much about him, it looks like he could be quite sort of a level-headed and straightforward kind of keeper, meat and drink, but every now and then just reminded you very much that he was not that keeper. I'd sort of forgotten about Stefan Honcho, which was, I think I'd gone through a lot of very expensive therapeutic work to forget about Stefan Honcho, except when I'm with my Arsenal relatives that I mentioned to you, because I always remember his wonderful theatrics there to prevent Thierry Henry from scoring a perfectly valid goal, of course. But it was a weird one. So I try not to apply the really ruthless standards that we do when we're looking at people like Alisson and players in our team now who are setting such ridiculous standards. That was difficult. But yeah, you mentioned my age, and I think it was an interesting one because I grew up in North London, and so really, like the vast majority of my friends were Arsenal or Tottenham fans, as were quite a lot of my family, and it was only my dad who'd been a lifelong Red, who was sort of trying to sell, this. No, you should support this club. And I think around about 8, 9, 10. That was when I really started to sort of watch it properly. Started to recognize more about individual players. Was sort of understanding what styles I liked and didn't like and things like that. So yeah, it was a nice trip down memory lane watching this game, and also just remembering just how many times a seemingly straightforward fixture Liverpool made hard work of it.
I'd love to tell you that was my experience too, but I was sadly a grown-ass man of 27 with a child at that point in my life. So it was quite a contrast. There. So I again, and it's just relevant because it's going to color how we talk about the game, because how we remember it initially does. And Dave, there's so much that I'd like to talk about with the game, because this season, this 2000-2001 season, on a personal note, made me sort of really get back to the fanatical nature of support. My college years were from early into the mid 90s. And then, like I said, towards those late 90s, my kid was born in 1998. So you necessarily take your eye off the ball a little bit. But there's also something about that had me back in regular hours and having to be around all the time. So the TV was going on. And through 2000, 2001, I started watching lots of football again. Never missed a Reds game. But that little dark period from the early to mid 90s and in towards the late 90s, that's a bit of a grey area for me, and it was very much a grey area for the club. This season, Dave, I mean, we've seen United fans denigrate it. We've all read the plastic treble bullshit. But this was absolutely huge for this club. And this guy, Gerard Houllier, who had instilled a new culture, modernized it in a really, really clear way, and was reaping the rewards. And it felt very special to me, Dave. I've such fond memories of this season, even though the results weren't always fantastic in the Premier League, but it was just an exciting, exciting season.
It was, very much so. And it's worth remembering that at the time, only the top three got into the Champions League, and we finished third, only a point behind Arsenal, after a really good sort of late season surge in the Premier League, where we won 6 of our last 7. I was fortunate enough to be at this game, this 2001 UEFA Cup final. A ticket obtained through a manner that would have gotten me banned from playing rugby if people had found out how I got it. But yeah, part of a bribery package that took me to a certain part of the country I hadn't previously intended to go to was regular tickets to go see Liverpool. So I actually got to go to quite a few games this year. And like you, I'd sort of, between, like finishing school, junior cert, leaving cert, playing a lot of rugby, traveling, playing rugby and things like that, I'd sort of, and the fact that Liverpool just weren't very good for a couple of years, I'd sort of drifted a little bit in my kind of teen years, not just from Liverpool, but from football in general for a few years. I'd still get excited for like a World Cup or a European Championship, but not so much for club titles or club games and things like that. But this season really was kind of, in part because I'd been given the opportunity to go to a lot of the games, and in part because the team got so much better. But this season really was the one that lifted a lot of gloom, because if you think about it, we started the 90s winning that league title in 89-90.
Yeah.
And then obviously we win the FA Cup in 92, and we've done a podcast on that game before. But from 92 to 01, the only thing we win is that League Cup, the McManaman final. We lose an FA Cup final to United. And while our league form isn't bad, and there's a lot of good football being played, the Roy Evans team were very entertaining, it wasn't like, you found it hard to get really excited, because especially living in Ireland, you didn't get to see, like, we're talking pre-internet, pre-streaming. You only really got to see Liverpool if they were on Sky. You didn't get to see them otherwise. And back then, we were only really on Sky if we were playing a big team. Sky, it wasn't like today where there's hundreds of games. There was one game a week, sometimes 2. You might get a Monday night game as well. But it was really rare to see Liverpool live at that point, like in the late 90s. But this season was just a complete roller coaster, because, like you said, the league form wasn't great, especially in the first half of the season. We lost 6 games in our first 19, and we lost number 20. But then we did, like I said, we went on that really good run late in the season. But there was a big mixed bag in the league. But the cups were sort of sustaining us, especially this competition. And like the FA Cup back then was still seen as very, very important. The FA Cup back then was the type of trophy that if you didn't win the league, but you won the FA Cup, you'd had a great year. So, with having both of those to kind of sustain you through some of the dog days of that mid-season, it could keep you on board. And Houllier, there was a likability about Houllier. There was something where you could relate to him, because he didn't seem like a football manager. Like, he was a very humble man, quite softly spoken. And
you remember the Jack Charlton conversation, dig at Houllier. He says, I'm not a fan of school teachers in football as
Yeah.
what Jack
Yeah.
said. And there was still that. You're still talking about transitionary period where Arsene Wenger and his methodology is being questioned as well.
Yeah.
It's a culture shift, and Gerard Houllier was the one who ushered it in for us. You know,
and like the thing is, we're 15 years on at this point. We're 15 years on or 14 years on from Arrigo Sacchi, a former shoe salesman, being appointed manager of AC Milan and going on to craft arguably the greatest club side the game has ever seen. Yeah. And yet there's still this old school football mentality that if you haven't played the game, you shouldn't talk about the game, you can't manage in the game. But as Sacchi said himself, do you need to have been a horse to become a jockey?
Yeah. It's a great line. It's a great line, and we'll keep coming back to Gerard Houllier as we go through this because I think he warrants it. And Harry, just to pivot again back to you for a more general point at the start of this, there's a lot of good footballers that have come in on Gerard Houlier's watch, and a couple of great ones that have come through the system. It's a weird time for the club. You've got Owen, and you've got Fowler, and you've got Stevie Gerrard, and you've got Jamie Carragher, and they're all sort of, from our underage teams coming through. This is obviously very, very exciting and is very early in their careers. Jamie Carragher playing left back this season, which is actually one of his best seasons for the club, and he went obviously played across the back four. Stevie Gerrard just emerging as this character. And I went to look for the DVD that I had of this treble season just to watch it and watch all the other games that would have been played in the lead up to this chaotic match that we're going to focus on. And of course, Harry, it's a bloody VHS, isn't it? And I've got nothing to play VHS on. But I found it on YouTube, that exact thing that I had. And one of the interesting things was, I guess, the ambition levels. Michael Owen at one stage, the fated young Michael Owen at his peak really, says to one of the Sky interviewers at one point, "Oh, well, the gaffers told us that 2 points a game gets us Champions League. So you do the sums there at 72 points. So if we're on track for that." I think at this stage they had like 10 out of 15 points in the opening part of the season. And I just felt we have surged forward so much under Jurgen Klopp. But like I said to Dave, this was a really important surge forward too, or even just sticking our heads back in the area where the club bloody should be, having had the doldrums of the 90s.
Yeah, no, completely. And it's interesting hearing you both speak about it there in terms of sort of maybe having a period where, for whatever reason, you didn't follow it as greatly, or slightly a little bit more disillusioned with things, given that the club weren't doing necessarily that well. And obviously for me, it was sort of a different period of sort of like the building blocks of sort of my football fandom around. I get a lot of stick, not from Tottenham fans, because obviously, but from Arsenal fans, especially in that era. And it seems to have continued throughout the decades, despite wherever they are on the table. Just a lot of stick when you're growing up around why are you supporting this team, and like you're rubbish, and like a lot of quite arrogant stuff that being thrown around. And I'm sure I questioned my dad a bunch of times around, why was it that you first started supporting this team? Why don't you support a local team or whatever? And then like he to his credit, I remember him showing me videos of the past greats, the games that you were sort of talking about around, where Liverpool's sort of real foundations of sort of success and greatness were built upon. And so for me, this season and sort of the success that we had in this season, and I think you're right, even though I probably didn't appreciate it at the time, the modernization that was coming in through Houllier and through some of the recruitment and through some of the culture changes that were going on, it was really sort of the start of my sort of throwing my weight around a little bit as a football fan. Well, yes, this is a team that's, it's winning. It's a treble season. You can make fun of it all you want if it's not seemingly not the trophies that you think are the ones that are most important. I think people would probably look at it sort of these days and maybe be quick to say that. But I think Dave's right. You know, some of those trophies were still held in very high esteem in those days. And I think there was something about the way in which we did it as well, with that little bit of chaos thrown in there as well, that as a younger football fan who's sort of growing into the game even more, made it even more exciting, right? And some of those names that you were mentioning there from who'd come through the academy were obviously sort of players that I was drawn towards. But I even sort of rewatching it, just remembered sort of the fondness I had towards Gary Mack and Marcus Babbel at his best at times, and of course big Sami Hyypiä as well. So just to watch those players as well and rediscover sort of how I was sort of felt towards them as a kid was definitely a fun experience.
My five-a-side nickname in the era was Heskey for my barreling style, shall we say.
Well, Heskey as well, though, because I remember just watching Heskey when Heskey was really good, and I feel like he so quickly became this sort of like joke figure, especially on the internet, around when that sort of football culture on the internet started growing a lot more, and vlogs and FIFA culture as well. He definitely became a real figure of fun, but I remember him being a real force of nature for at least a couple of seasons before things tailed off for him.
He was so good, Harry. And actually, the contrast and comparison with Arsenal must have been really painful for you, because you're talking a wonderful team. Their prime era, Thierry Henry. I mean, Jesus Christ, that must have been particularly painful by way of comparison. All right, you can just imagine your London mates digging you out. All right, but we just want to set this up a little bit, Dave, as well, because just to talk about, bring it back to Gerard Houllier before we get to the game, there was a big influx of players at the start of this season. Now, we obviously had a lot of good lads on the book, but in June, we bring in Bernard Diomed. We bring in July, Gary Mack, who's obviously transformative, Peggy Arfexad, less said the better, Marcus Babbel, who's already been mentioned, and may well be my favourite ever right back for Liverpool, and also Nick Barmby, and also Christian Ziege. And then in the September, we bring in Gregory Vignal, Daniel Sjolen comes in November of 2000. 7th of December, we bring in Igor Bishkan, and the magnificent Jari Litmanen joins in the 4th of January 2001. But that little initial group, I think Ziege was the latest one to arrive. I don't think Ziege was done in July. I think Ziege came at the very start of the season, or even when the season had started. But
there was a big protracted mess over that, because we paid a buyout clause in his contract that we had no real reason to know was in his contract. And so Borough reported us for tapping up, because they were looking to get like 10, 11 million for him. Because you have to remember, at the time, Christian Ziege was seen as one of the best left backs in world football.
Yeah, he was the
starting. Yeah, he was the starting German left back. So yeah, I think that's what happened. It got delayed for months because of that's what I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think it was because of that thing. There was a big legal thing that dragged on for like a month or two. And we ended up paying a bit of compensation. I think we got a fine as well and a couple of slaps on the wrist. But I mean, that's a very Houllier type of window, or a Houllier type of season's worth of transfers. So Diomed, a guy that at the time, again, pre-internet, we didn't really know who he was. 3 million on this French winger. Houllier knew the French market, so we put a bit of trust in him. Gary Mack, obviously everybody knew he'd been part of that really great Leeds team that won a league title. He'd somehow found his way to Coventry, which I think was a shock to everybody when he went there. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was something to do with wanting to be back in the Midlands where he'd lived when he was at Leicester. But regardless, he was far too good to have gone to Coventry. Strachan was the manager as well for a while, so that probably played a part. Well, yeah, we got Gary Mack, who at 36, we all thought, okay, good squad player to have, brings experience, and that'll help because, Gerrard is coming through. Danny Murphy at the time was seen as a very promising young midfielder. We'd obviously signed, I think, Didi Hammond the year before this. And Marcus Babbel, I remember hearing that we'd signed Marcus Babbel and thinking it was a mistake. Not that we'd signed him, that somebody gotten their wires crossed. I was like, there's no way we've signed Marcus Babbel.
Yeah.
This guy's one of the best defenders in the world. There's no way we've signed for free. How have we got this guy for free? He's unbelievably good.
Yeah, I loved him.
And like you said, until Trent appeared, Marcus Babbel was absolutely the benchmark for a Liverpool right back. Now, his Liverpool career obviously was ruined by the illness that he suffered, but without question, Marcus Babbel was world class, absolutely world class. Then, Gregory Vignal, another young player you're taking a punt on. Nicky Barmby had been very good for Spurs, had gone to Middlesbrough, had done pretty well there, but then they signed Juninho, and the two of them couldn't really play together, so he ends up at Everton. But he was still a good player. We nab him. Daniel Sjoland, I remain convinced to this day that the only reason we signed him was because we were trying to sign Jari Litmanen, and they have the same agent. I don't know if they had the same agent, but it's the only logical thing I can think of. And Igor Bishkan. Now, Igor would do some good things for us in later years. He played an important part in the run to the Champions League win in 2005. The Deportivo away in particular, I think it was the game he stood out. But we signed him when we could have signed Michael Ballack. So I've always had a bit of an issue with that one. Plus, this was one of the first ones where, there was a period of time where every player we signed, Gerard Houllier would call them the next something. They're the next. I think this guy is the next.
Oh, and then, yeah.
Bruno Cheru, remember, was the next Zidane.
Yeah.
As far as I can, and Florence Cinema Pongal was the next Anelka, and Natalak was the next Platini or some garbage. I think he said Igor Bishkan was the next Vieira. If memory serves, that's what he said. So yeah, none of that's good. But again, we've brought in Gary Mack, we've brought in Marcus Babbel, and they would go on to be foundational pieces. The Ziga deal just didn't work. He never really settled. And like you guys mentioned, Carragher's playing left back, despite being right-footed and relatively slow, while this absolute weapon just can't get in the team because he's not performing well enough. But what's notable that summer as well, Trev, is some of the players that left.
Oh, yeah.
Stig Inge Bjorneby, who'd just been around forever, crossing the ball from the halfway line, because why would you bother going any further to cross it? Phil Babb, who became known to everybody after the 94 World Cup. Liverpool paid a fortune for him, and it turned out he was only ever good when Paul McGrath was holding his hand. The highlight of his Liverpool career is him sliding bollocks first into a goalpost. David Thompson was a quality young midfielder that I think there was a lot of high hopes for, just didn't work out. Dominic Matteo, whose most notable thing at Liverpool, I think, was the year he bleached his hair with Robbie Fowler, but was a solid player. Brad Friedel was meant to be this great goalkeeper, couldn't get a work permit, and then for whatever reason, it just never worked. He'd go on to Blackburn on a free and went on to be a great goalkeeper for them for years. Rigobert Song, whose most famous Liverpool moment was when Gerard Houllier said Robbie Fowler was eating the grass in tribute to Rigobert Song when he was pretending to snort a line. Steve Staunton, Liverpool legend. This was the end of his second spell at the club. Eric Meyer left in December and then turned up in Dortmund for the final in the crowd with the fans, drinking cans and just been absolutely hilarious. Titi Camara, who I loved, wasn't a great player, but that guy's dad died and he played because he wanted to play and honour his dad, and he scored and he burst into tears. And now he spends a lot of his time trolling Everton fans on Twitter, which is just wonderful.
Oh, he's great.
Hakar Ingi Goodnison, who I have no memory of at all, and John Newby, who was a young lad that came through and just didn't make the grade. So he sold a lot of players as well as bought a lot of players. Houllier was an underrated wheeler dealer. Like, there's a little bit of Harry Redknapp in Jed. If he'd spent a bit more time hanging out of car windows talking to Sky Sports, he might have gotten a bigger profile. But it's a lot of work being done in the transfer market over the course of that season. Some of it good, some of it bad. But like Gary Mack and Marcus Babbel, it infuriates me when I hear people say, who are the best free transfers Liverpool ever had, and Marcus Babbel never gets mentioned, despite the fact that he is by far the best player we've ever signed in a free. By far.
By a mile. I love the idea of Jed being in Jim White's speed dial section. All right, I have to say that's an interesting one. Let's just put this season in context for those who are thinking back and wondering what the hell was actually happening back in that time. It's just a cultural point of interest, and this was suggested by somebody. And I apologize profoundly. I cannot find who it was that suggested this to me. I thought it was a fantastic idea. So I just want to give a little bit of, now obviously second half of 2001, we all know the big paradigm shifting world event that happens in September, but we're just going to look at the first half just to let you know what kind of things are going on. Believe it or not, in January of 2001, iTunes was launched. That's quite interesting and a relevant thing. Wikipedia is launched as well. Another sort of, cultural centerpiece. In the February of that year, there was a couple of different things happen. Most notably for me was, because I remember this profoundly, was the foot and mouth outbreak across the UK. That was a big old deal. In March of that year, there was the space station Mir was deorbited, which was big news at the time. In April, we had... lots of different things, but probably the most important cultural thing of note was Slobodan Milosevic surrendering to special forces and eventually to be charged on war crimes. And then the Soyuz rocket lifted off as well with the first ever space tourist, an American called Dennis Tito. In May of that year, Tito returns, and they actually left the Soyuz there docked at the International Space Station as a new lifeboat, which I actually loved reading about back in the time as well. Silvio Berlusconi won the general election. Lots of stories we could talk about with Silvio to become the Prime Minister of Italy. And in June, to bring it home in terms of politics, Tony Blair and his Labour Party won a landslide victory for the second time. Tony Blair would go on to have very specific involvements with the aftermath of that big event we spoke about on September 11th, but less said about that the better. That's a little kind of cultural snapshot of what was going on at the time historically. Let's get into this game and let's get into these teams, because holy hell, this is an interesting game. Lots of events. Liverpool will start off with Westerveld in goal. They have Babbel, Honcho, Hupia, Carragher across their back four, Gerrard, Murphy, Hamann and McAllister in midfield, Owen and Heskey up top. And it is very much that kind of sort of 4-4-2 shape. They have Peggy Arfexad as sub-keeper, Vladdy Smeeter's on the bench, Robbie Fowler's on the bench, Paddy Berger's on the bench, Nick Barmby is there too, alongside Greg Vinal and Wright, another youngster who came through the Liverpool Academy. I'm going to start off here because we're going to use this as a platform to talk about some of the players specifically. I've already alluded to the intense fondness I had for Emile Heskey at this time. It was hard not to really admire someone like Michael Owen, even though I don't know what it was. You just never really warmed to him in the same way as he did to some others. But for me, just Robbie Fowler was what Liverpool was all about. And Robbie Fowler was the connective tissue between me and the club for those darker years and distant years that I spoke about. I I could not get enough of Robbie Fowler. I watched Liverpool to see Robbie Fowler. So, it's brilliant for me that he goes on to score such a magnificent goal in this. And he has obviously that brilliant goal in the League Cup final as well. To win it, an outrageous hit. This is, I think, possibly top 3 favourite players for me. He might even be second after Kenny in terms of just how I felt about him. He was outrageously talented, Dave. And I'll get a take from Harry on him as well. An outrageously talented footballer. There's a sort of a feeling that, he never really got to the peaks he could have gotten to. And there's a sort of a feeling that he was a bit of a sort of a likely lad and maybe didn't take things as seriously as he could have and all this kind of things. These are the stories and sort of rumors that persist. I honestly couldn't give a shit about any of them because for me, his contribution to the club and his impact on me as a footballer was immense. I just can't speak highly enough of the footballer that was Robbie Fowler.
Oh, he was outrageously talented is exactly the right way to describe him, Trev. He was incredibly gifted. Like, people always talk about him as this incredible finisher, which of course he was, but they act like that's all he was. Like, this guy could beat players on the dribble with ease. He could ping a pass anywhere he wanted. Robbie Fowler had everything. I don't think he got close to reaching his potential, but I'm not going to sit here and say it was because of how he acted. It's because of the injuries. Like, his knee exploded. He had just constant problems with injuries. You look at his first 4 seasons with the club. 93, 94. He's 17. 17. He scores 18 goals in 34 games. Next season, he's 31 and 57, then 36 in 53, 31 and 44. That brings you to the end of the 96-97 season when Robbie Fowler's 22 years of age. And
that's a Mo Salah type run, Dave. That's a Mo Salah type run.
At 22, he's put together 3 world-class seasons in a row. He's one of the best players in the country. And it's the next season, that 97-98 season, when the injuries start to really slow him down. But he still scores 13 and 28. The following season, he's 18 and 35. So he's still a goal every 2 games, as opposed to the sort of 2 goals every 3 games he was for the previous few seasons. He's still scoring goals. Then 99-2000, only plays 14 games, scores 3 goals. That's when I think he has the bad knee injury. Bounces back in this season with 17 in 48 across all competitions, massively important in the League Cup, 6 and 5 games. And in the following season, obviously, is when he's sold mid-season. I remember seeing Fowler speak about this season, about how he felt like Houllier was trying to force him out this year. And I have a theory that one of the reasons people don't respect Emile Heskey the way Heskey deserves to be respected for the player he was in his first few seasons at Liverpool is because Heskey is the one that sort of ended Fowler as a starter in the Liverpool team, because Houllier preferred to have that big physical presence of Heskey along with Owen, and Fowler sort of became that third striker who didn't play as much as he should have, didn't play as many minutes as he should have, was off the bench a lot of times. And I do think there's a lot of, our favourite player has just been taken out of the team by this fella, and he's good, but he's not our favourite player. I think there's a bit of that with Heskey. Now, obviously, when the end came for Heskey, it came quite drastically. He went to Birmingham, had 1 good season, and was then fairly poor beyond that. But Emile Heskey, when we signed him, was really good. It's just that he wasn't Robbie Fowler. And you could identify with Robbie Fowler, even if you weren't from the city and you didn't have that connection to him, you could identify with a lad that lifted his shirt to show support for striking Dockers. You could identify with a guy that took great pride in where he was from, in a guy that wanted to have a laugh and do funny things like snorting a line. Not that you'd be encouraging that type of behavior, of course, but you could identify with him doing that type of thing as a bit of a piss take, because obviously it was in response to reports that that's what he'd been up to in his private life. If that was said about somebody now, they'd probably bring a lawsuit. Robbie's answer was to get down and kind of mock it, like. So yeah, I mean, Fowler was ridiculous.
This is
Absolutely
a lad, of course.
Ridiculous.
This is a lad, of course, who famously later called one of his racehorses "some horse," and then the second one was "some other horse," so that the commentators would have to say that.
That's some horse.
Remarkable. Some horse coming up on the outside. Fantastic. You got to love that. So, Harry, just to take it back to you again and again, like, just there's the nice contrast there as well. In the early days of your sort of burgeoning Liverpool support, who is it that takes the pride of place in terms of your admiration from that lineup there? Who's the guy that you're sort of imprinting on as, this is like going to be an all-time favourite player for me? Or is there anyone from this squad?
I mean, I think the player who, I mean, I'm trying to think back to the sort of the magazines that were coming out in those days that I used to follow along with for football as well. I think they're trying to push Michael Owen at that stage. I think he was very much getting a lot of coverage. But from that lineup, I mean, I was trying to think whether or not Gerrard was really properly on my radar yet. And I was watching his performance in the game, and obviously probably without being able to cut out all the hindsight that I've got of the player that he developed to become. So you're watching it and you think, oh yeah, there's all these little flashes of the player that he would later become. Like, surely I was completely up on him when I was watching them as well. But no, I think Heskey. I think I was quite actually sort of a fan of Heskey, like I was talking about. I mean, I think it not only because of how I felt he was sort of unfairly sort of derided towards the end of his career, and so I think even now people don't really talk about how much of a force he was when he was in his prime. But I think I just enjoyed his style, because it's sort of this slightly awkward. Sort of languid running style at times, and he'd put himself about to win the ball, and you'd think that he was doing it in quite maybe maybe not a purely intentional way, just trying to be disruptive, trying to win the ball, but wasn't necessarily going to be directed. Was there an intent behind it? But actually, when you watch him in those early days as well, there was very often an intent behind it, and there was very often good technique behind it that I don't think he was actually given credit for. So obviously Owen, I think, at that stage, obviously he then didn't become a lifelong hero for me, because he committed many cardinal sins following his time at Liverpool. But yeah, it's hard not to be sort of impressed by him. I honestly do remember being just a very big fan of Patrick Berger and Gary Mack for certain. Gary Mack, I don't think I really computed that he was 36 when he joined. I had no idea how old I thought Gary McAllister was, and I was constantly surprised by only sort of the level of his technique, and I think that was evident throughout this game in plenty of occasions. But then also just the fact that he'd still be there at sort of 85 minutes, seemingly like with reserves of energy, which I wasn't necessarily expecting. So yeah, definitely liked him, and maybe not just at this stage was he quite as much of a hero to me, but I was a massive Sami Hyypiä fan by the time he ended up leaving the club as well. So he was somebody that I was definitely drawn to as well. Fowler, as you mentioned, I think it was pretty hard not to be impressed by him. I think I was probably guilty of what Dave was mentioning there, of just reducing him to being this awesome, naturally talented finisher, because I think there's so many examples, right, of outrageous levels of finishing in situations where you maybe, I don't know what the XG would be in those situations of plenty of his goals, but he took his chances with a real ruthless touch. So he was another one as well, but I don't think I perhaps had the same level of connection with him from those who watched him sort of rise up through to the academy.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And, we do have to say just at some point in this podcast, because it's very tempting to sort of, focus on what Michael Owen has gone on to be or become as a fella, and not really sort of celebrate how unbelievably good he was at this point of his career. Like, just bananas levels of excellence. I was looking at that season review, and there's one stage where somebody just lumps a ball from the back, and he outjumps a centre half, takes it on his chest, and sort of directs it away. Then runs to where the ball is, and a bit of skill, and tees up. I think it's Nicky Barmby who's coming through, and you're just looking at this guy going, Jesus, he really had it all. Obviously, ridiculous finisher. Houllier pays tribute regularly to how he can score all the goals. And he's always got that knack of being in the right place at the right time and all the rest of it. But just again, when he that strength and power and pace and energy and enthusiasm that you have as a youngster as well, that was one hell of a package, Harry. That Michael Owen was at that stage of his career, like a real asset to any team. And of course, you alluded to it. He mugs Arsenal and gets us that FA Cup in this treble season.
I remember,
and it's his brilliant.
Yeah. Just weirdly, Trev, I remember. I can't remember where I was beforehand that made me end up watching this, but I remember I was annoyed with my with my dad because he sent me to do something. I can't remember what it was during some of the game, and it was getting towards the end of it, and I was furious. I was having to go out and do some sort of chore, and I ended up jumping into a chip shop which had it on TV, and just secretly hanging out there and watching the game. So I think I saw that goal in a chip shop in North London, which was and yeah, there was a Liverpool fan behind the counter. But yeah, I always remember that with him, yeah, and the front flip, obviously.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, just outrageous. And we'll come back to talk about him as we go through the details of the match. Just before we get there, Dave, just to wrap up this first half of the show, we should have a look at the opposition on the night. Now, none of us are going to pretend that we are or we have deep knowledge about Alaves at that point, because for Alaves to be there was quite remarkable in and of itself. And they started with Herrera, poor Gelly or Jelly, who ends up being on the sort of decisive moment right at the end of extra time. Contra, Egan, Carmona, who got himself sent off, Tellez, Decio, Astudio, Tomic, Javi Moreno, who is very much a focus during the game, and young Cruyff, Jordi Cruyff, son of Johan. On the bench, they had Kike, Begonia, they had Ortiz, Pablo Magno, who comes on to interesting effect, Raul Ganan, Ivan Alonso, who comes on and gets them back in the game with a header, and Azcoitia. Now, I will hold my hands up and say that I had no knowledge of Alaves at all. I think I had heard of Javi Moreno, and obviously I knew Cruyff. That was it. That was Cruyff had done a little stint at United. That was it in terms of my knowledge of them. So they were very much a surprise package, and my fury was building as the match was going on, as I alluded to earlier on, because we were very much in control. And then I was going, who are these no-marks who are going to deprive us of this trophy in this outrageous game that we're going to talk about? And my annoyance was built very much in the fact that I had an ignorance about them as a group of players. What's your own memory of what you made of them or what you knew about them at the time?
My memory is thinking, who? When I saw, the only player I think I knew at the time would have been Jordi Cruyff. Maybe Dan Egan. I might, because he did play for Celta Vigo. I think he was in that Celta Vigo team with Medvedev and that. So maybe him. But Jordi Cruyff was the one that you knew, and you didn't even know him for him. You knew him because of who his dad was and the fact he'd been at United for a year, or a few years, and never really played. That was about it. And to be fair, my most prominent memory of anything to do with Jordi Cruyff was in early 2012, around April, when the discussions were starting on Twitter of, should Kenny go? if you remember back then. And I was in the view of that he should go, and that it was a mistake to give him the job permanently. He'd done a great job as caretaker, but we needed to move on. And we were in the midst of a horrible run in the league at the point, and I did a couple of tweets about it. And Paul Dalglish called me a twat. And I told him to shut his mouth and that he was only a shit Jordi Cruyff. And and I love Paul, and I get on quite well with him now whenever we have any interaction. But yeah, that's my most prominent Jordi Cruyff memory, is telling Paul Dalglish he was only a shit Jordi Cruyff. Yeah, that's the only, because, like, in fairness, he was a talented player, was Jordi Cruyff, and at a club like Alaves, or that kind of mid-level club, he had a solid enough career with them and Espanyol and that. But the issue was he was obviously forced to a level that he just wasn't good enough for at Barca and at United because of who his dad had been. There was this sort of, obviously at Barca, he came through the academy while his dad was the manager. And at United, it was, I assume they signed him because of the name recognition, because that's when they were really starting to grow their brand. But yeah, he was a talented player, just never became anything close to what people were going to hype him up to me. I'm just reading here that in later years, he became a centre-back, which, when you consider he broke through as a winger, kind of says it all, really. But yeah, I mean, it was very much, who are Alaves? Who are these players? Don't know who they are. We're going to smash the granny out of these lads. We've just won, 2 cups. We've won we finished third in the league. There's no way they're beating us. We're winning this game, and that's just how it's going to be. And it actually, to be fair, we didn't play our last league game, I don't think, till the following Saturday. But yeah, we were strong favourites to win this game, and you expected us to win it comfortably, coming off the back of beating Arsenal in that incredible FA Cup final. And as you mentioned, Michael Owen at this point is just absolutely otherworldly in terms of the level of football that he's playing. And you just expected us to win very, very comfortably, because when you looked at it, and our path to the final is something that is quite fun here. So we beat Rapid Bucharest, scraped by them, it's worth pointing out. We beat Slovan Liberec. Then we get a famous home win against Olympiacos, which obviously happens again 5 years later. Then we beat Roma in fairly powerful circumstances, and obviously we would have more battles with Roma and a more kind of telling games against Roma in coming years. We beat Porto, who we seem to play every time we go into Europe. And then we beat Barcelona in the semi-final. In
Barcelona of Rivaldo, the Rivaldo era.
Like a massive upset that we beat them. A 0-0 draw away, a 1-0 win at home. It was surprising that we'd beaten them. And you looked at what they'd done, and they beat some team from Turkey that I can't pronounce the name of, Lillestrøm, Rosenborg. Like, they're playing Norwegian teams in back-to-back rounds. Then they play Inter Milan, and Inter were garbage at the time. They did have some good players. They beat Rayo Vallecano. They beat Kaiserslautern. Like, there's nothing you're seeing from them that's kind of worrying you. They're just kind of there on the other side, and you're not really paying any attention to them. So when we got them in the final, I was thinking, right, great. When we were in the semi-final playing Barca, I do remember thinking, regardless, if we get past Barca, we're hammering whoever comes out of the other side, because Kaiserslautern aren't good, and this lot I've never heard of, so they can't be any good either. And I suppose it is, like, again, pre-internet, pre-Wikipedia, pre-YouTube, pre-having access to being able to watch games from all around the world at the fucking drop of a hat. Like, you just had that ignorance about certain clubs, and they'd never done anything before.
But the contrast with the opposition in the 77 European Cup final that we spoke about last week. I mean, we never mind Wikipedia, YouTube, all the rest of it. You weren't alive, and I was a mere child. But that doesn't matter, because these players had such massive reputations and had been involved in so many great things. This lot just not the case, as you've outlined there, really taken several times during the coverage by Jose Manuel Esnal Pardo, the manager, who seemed to advertise in the paper for a lad who looked exactly like him to sit beside him on the bench and look pissed off for the duration of the match. That was a constant highlight for me. Two balding, mustachioed, angry-looking men sitting there in their sports jackets on the bench. Worth watching for that alone. I don't know what they were trying to go for there, but it was a remarkable sort of effect that they created. And we should get into the details of the match, Dave, and I'll start with you, and we'll take it from there. And like I said, we set ourselves up pretty well early on, with Owen and Heskey up front, Fowler waiting on the bench. That's a good sign. We are going for this third trophy of the season. Everyone was building it up. It was all anyone was talking about in the build-up, because that particular combo was unprecedented. And as well as that, we had which we didn't think was going to be necessary, especially after the start of the game, the first 16 minutes or so, or 25 minutes or so. We didn't think this was going to be necessary, but we had the alluring golden goal experiment waiting for us if the match finished at 90 minutes on level terms, which it does. So we begin, really, the first event of note is us going 1-up. It's McAllister's free kick, floated in from about 25 yards, and the aforementioned Marcus Babbel getting up, lovely header past Herrera and goals, and sort of a sign of things to come, with Alaves looking a bit scattered at the back, and us then perhaps looking like we can make these set pieces pay. Did we ever? But in that opening section, we also have on the 9-minute mark, McAllister just about misses Heskey, who's running into space in the Alaves half, because Heskey was always running into space. They pick up their first booking because they are rattled. Astudillo, I think, bends Heskey with a really wild challenge. McAllister then gets himself in the book for chatting at the referee. Alaves still looking fairly sort of ragged at this stage. 13 minutes in, they have their first dig on target. It's a free kick, 25 yards out. It's beautifully bent around the wall, but Westerveld gets across to deny them an equaliser. Alaves starting to find a little bit of their feet at that point, but just as they do, 16 minutes, we go 2-up. It's Haman who plays the ball to Owen around the centre of the park. Owen looks up, he sees Gerrard running ahead, he threads a ball in through to him, and Gerrard's finish with this beautiful tango football under the keeper is excellent. And we look like we're running away with it, Dave.
We do. We absolutely do. I should admit here, I missed the first goal at the time because I was too busy arguing with my mate who stood next to me and the fella behind us who insisted that he had to put his hands on our shoulders. So the three of us are having an argument. I'm turned around telling this fella to get his hand off me. And all of a sudden, the whole place is going mental. And we decide then at that moment, it's absolutely fine to put your hand on my shoulder, buddy. Don't worry about it all. We're 1-up and we're running away with this thing. So, yeah, I knew Marcus Babbel had scored. I didn't see the goal for probably a year or two afterwards because I didn't watch any replays of the game. Yeah. But, yeah, Marcus Babbel with a great header. Like, it's a gorgeous delivery. He ghosts in between defenders, and it's a great header. As you said, like they had a couple of, and it looked like it was going to be one of those kind of back and forth games. But when we get that second goal, you do just assume that's it, game over. Like we've got at that time a great defense. Babbel, Hancho, Hupia, Carragher, and Didi sitting in front of them. You're looking and thinking, there's no way they're scoring twice. Like. They might get one, but if they do, we'll get a third. This is over. And that was genuinely the mood among the fans at that game was this is now over. They're not scoring twice in this game. And again, it's largely down to our own ignorance, but also the faith we had in this defense that, had been so good throughout the season, had been so strong round after round in all the different cups in the league. It was just, you couldn't foresee a circumstance in which they were going to score 2 goals. And if they did, you felt like we'd get more because we had Owen, we had Heskey, we had Fowler to come off the bench. So it was very much jubilation when that Gerrard goal went in. But you highlighted the bit of play. Hamann into Owen. It's a great first touch to open his body up. And a lovely little pass through the defence for Gerrard to run onto. Perfectly weighted, and Stevie just needs to smash it home. But what happens here, Trev, is one of the more interesting and ballsy moves I've ever seen in a major game by a manager. We're 22 minutes in, and they take off one of their 3 centre-backs and throw on another forward. They throw on Alonso for Egan. Now, if you're Egan, you're going to be feeling fairly sour about this, obviously, because you've just been taken off, and neither of the goals were your fault. But I think you have to give massive credit to their manager for just saying, if we're going out, we're getting hammered here. We're not just going to lie down for this lot. We're going to go out swinging here. And he brings on a striker who has a fairly immediate impact.
Yeah, 4 minutes, and he is putting them back in the game at 2-1 because we're kind of caught in the hop a bit. Ivan Alonso, the lad who's come on, pulls away from Marcus Babbel, gets up well at the far post and heads in a nice cross by Contra. So you, of course, you're looking at the grumpy looking Pardo there going fair play. I think his nickname was Mane. Actually, I think he was known as. And as you say, a really, really important intervention and swung the game back in their favour where it could really have gotten ugly for them. And I just wanted, before I go to Harry to finish out that first half, I just want to ask you something. As someone who was there, like, again, I had very much the impression that the dominant supporter force was the Reds, was the travelling cop. That's how it felt to me with all the packages I watched. Is that what it was actually like in the stadium? Was it, as we always expect for a Liverpool game, unless UEFA get their meddling hands into it too much, we expect that it's going to be a dominant amount of supporters for the Reds. It's always been that way in the club's history. I didn't get any figures on that. Did it look that way to you? Did it feel that way to you, more to the point?
It felt like 3/4 of the stadium was Liverpool fans. It felt like it was a home game. Yeah. Because they were congregated mostly in one end, and they didn't even fill the end. Like, there were a couple of gaps in there because they, like, let's be fair, they're not a huge club by any means. Like, their home stadium only holds 19,500 and they don't sell it out regularly. They're not a big club with big support. They've got a very loyal supporter base, and I will say their fans never stop making noise. Now, we thought when we when the area I was in, when we saw the substitution being made on 22, we thought it was the funniest thing we'd ever seen. Like, you're just going to hook a guy off after 20 minutes of the European final, and there was people singing "Nana Nana," goodbye and whatever else at him. But yeah, I mean, it felt like a home game, and in the city on the day of the game, it was almost like being in Liverpool because every accent you heard was either a Scouse accent, an English accent, or an Irish accent. There was the Germans just sort of were like, well, just take care of our city, but don't fucking wreck the place, and just sort of withdrew as the swarms took over. And you have to remember as well, like, this was our first European final since Heysel.
Yeah.
So this was a very important moment in our history. We had been almost erased off the European map because it had been so long. We'd had a couple of forays into Europe under Souness and under Evans that always ended spectacularly badly. I can remember as a young man being very upset watching Genoa beat us with Thomas Scaravi up front, but resolving to make Genoa the Italian club I would trail because they had lovely kits. But this was Gerard Houllier putting us back on the European map. But like I say, it had been the first final in 16 years. So you had a lot of Reds that had never been to a European final. Obviously, like those who were around in the 70s and 80s were absolutely spoiled. 2 UEFA Cup finals, 5 European Cup finals, 7 European finals, plus Super Cup finals in a 12, 13-year span. Like, it was ludicrous. They were spoiled for it. Whereas my generation, your generation, we'd never gotten to go to a final before. We were all too young to go in the early 80s and that. And we didn't get to go in the 90s because, well, the ban for the first couple of years and then just how bad we were. So, yeah, I think this was sort of a lot of people who had just been waiting for this moment, this opportunity to go to a big European final and support their team. And it was, I would say 75, 80% Liverpool fans, especially in the city. And there was a lot that went to the city that didn't actually go to the game. Yeah. Like they stayed in the bars and that outside.
It's such a gorgeous trophy as well. It's just such a gorgeous trophy.
It's a nicer trophy than Big Ears.
Yeah, it's just aesthetically beautiful, and when we win it at the end, we go level with, I think, Juve and maybe one other club as the team that's won it the most at that point. I think 3 victories. And Harry, like, we can fly through a good chunk of this game now to bring us into the second half. Maybe even go as far as 3-3. And I'll get you to pick out the bits from it that I go through here that you want to go through. Like I say, as they get back into it via Ivan Alonso, there is a bit of a shift. Contra's doing very well on the right for them, whipping over crosses. Honcho's involved there, putting those out. Honcho has a bit of a mare. He kind of misjudges the ball into Moreno, who can't control it, and Babel gets his pal out of a bit of shtick there. Westerveld has to make a save at the far post, and we're very much at this point on the back foot. Babel with another great tackle on Moreno on the byline. He's really earning his corners, Marcus Babel, tonight. The pressure continues. We're on the rack. Moreno's coming into this game. He has a chance just outside the 6-yard box. He dummies Honcho, takes 2 touches, shoots. Westerveld stands up and stops it. But even though they're building up a head of steam, we actually then go down the other end with a rare attack. It's a long ball down. I think it's Didi Hamann who plays it. Gets Owen away, and he's taken out. Gary Mack puts the ball in the spot and finishes it to Herrera's left. So we recover our lead, our 2-goal lead. Alaves do have a free kick, but it comes to nothing. And it's very nicely poised, but we've sort of gotten away with the one there to be going ahead. But it doesn't last. They do make more changes on halftime. Magno comes on for Astudillo, and Heskey gets away on the left-hand side, but doesn't do anything with his cross on 47 minutes. And in 48 minutes, they're back in it again. It's Contra who's doing a lot of damage on that side, twisting, turning, floats over across. Moreno heads it home, and it's a really good finish, leaving them right back in it. 50 minutes, we're under pressure again at the back. Honcho again struggling, gives away a free kick just over 20 yards out. Moreno steps up, shapes up to it, blasts it under a wall which jumps over the frickin' ball, and it goes to the back of the net, and it's 3-3 in this bananas football match. Of that section of the game, Harry, both your memories from the time and in review, it really did shift dramatically in terms of the balance of play and the propensity for both teams to look shaky as hell at the back, which, as Dave says, we should never be doing with the personnel we had.
Yeah, it was remarkable to see just how well we started the game and the goals that we get, the lead, and then you look at, as you mentioned, the defenders that we had. what I remembered of sort of Julio as well, in terms of not being necessarily like a cavalier coach that would necessarily like be okay with leaking loads of goals or things like that. And so when they did get back into it, and again, I think it's probably sort of a byproduct of what we find ourselves doing on Raw most regularly, right, where we're trying to dissect goals and usually looking at sort of athletes who are very, very talented, making slight misjudgments or things like that, or trying to sort of spot where the errors are. But this time it was all a lot. It was amazing to see how ragged we let ourselves become, considering some of the personnel who were out there. So I was even thinking around that first goal that they get back, which is a header. I mean, I was watching it back again and again, and thinking that, am I being harsh here, given how close he was to goal with that header, or is the goal and is the header actually incredibly central, and Westerveld just sort of jumps but doesn't sort of even seem to have time to make an effort, or even perhaps I was being harsh there. But again, we're sort of used to these standards that we've seen over the past few years, right, of Alisson always being in the right place. And watching things, I mean, as you mentioned, that Tellez effort, them coming back into it, Moreno, his goal, and then obviously the couple goals in quick succession. I mean, I thought the first one is Carragher in that unfamiliar position to me, in terms of sort of the bulk of his career to me is obviously what we remember of him at centre back. So even right from the off, when I saw the lineup, I was oh yeah, I remember he used to play from time to time in the fullback positions as he made his way into cementing his place as a centre back. But I mean, to me, I was looking at that from minute one, thinking he's going to get targeted, and I wasn't too surprised that they did seem to attack down his flank an awful lot. And as sort of determined a defender as he was, I mean, he gets turned inside out for that cross for the first Moreno goal, and then the second one. I suppose there's just somebody somewhere who was the pioneer of that, fella lying down behind the wall, just tapping his head and going, there you go, this is what it's for. And I remember we've got our own players who've sort of used that technique from time to time, Phil Coutinho and others who sort of did that with a lot of success. But even watching it, I was like, does he really rifle it? And he doesn't really. It's like sort of a bobbled shot, but because the wall jumps so early, I think it goes under Heskey. It goes in, and then I think we're used to it, right? In any particular game, despite the quality of the opposition and sort of the gap in quality, goals in quick succession like that can really, unsettle players. And I thought from that point onwards, I'm so stunned at how they managed to drag themselves back into the game, because they looked really, really nervous and anxious early on. You could just see the confidence that had come back into them, and a nervousness that had creeped into us. And I remember, as I was watching it, noting that Stefan Honchel was getting more and more rash and reminding me of some of the highlight Honchel's moments of his time at Liverpool. So it was it felt a familiar feeling, Trev, to be honest. I feel like, irrespective of how brilliant we've become or whatever, there's been these one-off games, and often they're in cup finals where the tension just seems to get to players at times, and what should be routine or should be a professional job suddenly becomes sort of chaos gets sort of thrown into it.
You mentioned Honchel, and Jed makes the call to hook him for Vladdy Smicer in 56 minutes.
Does, yeah.
Heskey comes on, Fowler comes on for Heskey on 64, and Robbie scores a goal that really should win it, Harry. It's on 73 minutes. He picks it up on the edge of the area. It's a great ball through to him from Gary Mack. He kind of turns and he slots with his right foot inside the left goal post of the keeper. Yeah. It's just a magnificent goal from a natural finisher, and it really should win the game. Owen is left up top on his own for the rest of the 90 until we get the 89th minute, where Westerveld concedes a corner, it gets swung over, and of course, because it's this game, Cruyff gets up ahead of everybody and heads it home. It's level, and we're into this golden goal thing. Now, there's too much bloody drama here, Harry. Isn't there? It's just too much. You can't get your head around it. I remember.
I should say Westerveld, like.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, watching it back, I sort of forgotten that Westerveld very nearly gives away a penalty before he concedes that. Before he concedes the corner that Cruyff ends up running in. So it's like, these moments of nervousness, and then suddenly you can see that we haven't got a keeper at that stage who's as level-headed as what we're used to these days. And you're right, that Fowler goal. The really good example of but everyone's thinking he probably wants to hit it onto his left foot and just buys himself enough time to sort of find the angle, slots it with his right. I remember at this point noting that the passing suddenly became really poor and people were under-hitting passes all over the shop. And the under-hitting of passes was leading to some very interesting tackles that were going on. I remember there was a dreadful one by Carmona, and obviously it comes back to bite him later on when he picks up another one, but a truly dreadful, probably a red then and probably a red now, certainly a red now as well. And also, just one thing as well, Trev, when that change was made for Stefan Honchos to go off, there was a very interesting sort of reshuffle at the back, and you just forget that that there were days when it would be Carragher still kept as the left back, Babel slotting in next to Huppier, and Gerrard just suddenly nods his head and goes, "Yeah, I'll play right back." And so suddenly you lose.
He
him.
didn't nod his head. He was told, "You get yourself back there, son. You get yourself back there." It's worth pointing out that an undiscussed theme of this game is that Danny Murphy had an absolute stinker, and from about 50 onwards, there were people loudly screaming at Gerard Houllier to get him off because he was doing nothing on the ball and he was getting absolutely tortured by Cosmin Contra from right wing back.
Yeah.
And Harry mentioned how they were just attacking down our left, their right. And it was because they had their right winger and Cosmin Contra both running at Carragher while Danny Murphy was scratching his hole. So, when Danny Murphy goes to sleep at night and remembers that game, he should be apologising to Jamie Carragher every single time because he just left him out to burn. It was absolutely shambolic how poor he was. But Gerrard at right back, Gerrard goes to right back, and a few people around me are moaning and been like, "Why is he putting Stevie to right back? Why is he putting Stevie to right back?" And some fella was just adamant that's his best position. That's where he's going to end up long term. Adamant he was that this is where he was going to be long term. And thankfully, that wasn't the case.
He loves doing that in the European final, though, to be fair to Stevie. We should get this wrapped up because the golden goal is only any crack if it happens after 2 or 3 minutes. All it does otherwise, if it doesn't come till the 27th frickin' minute, is make everybody unbelievably uncomfortable and tense. And that's exactly what this was. There were lads flying in, boys getting sent off. It was absolute carnage, that 27 minutes of football. And in many ways, lads, this is the way that this game should have ended, with a corner swung in and a defender putting through his own net with a glorious glancing backwards header to defeat his own keeper, because it was a crazy match that there was enough moments of brilliance and periods of dominance from us that we could say we possibly deserved it. Robbie's goal should have won it. But we were also skittish enough that you couldn't say that. And Alaves had earned the opportunity to pip us at the post. Thankfully, they didn't. And we're kind of at wrap-up time here on the show specifically, and I just want to get any kind of finishing thoughts that you both have. And Dave, I'll start with you, and then we'll finish with Harry, and we'll wrap it up at that. But just in terms of a cultural event in the club's history, it's hard to overestimate. You've talked quite eloquently about what this meant and the gap of time it was since we had been in one before, a European final before. This really felt incredible. For all the anxiety of the match, it felt incredible. This treble meant a lot to me personally, and I'm sure to a lot of Liverpool fans. And the primary thing, Dave, is we're winning frickin' trophies again. Yeah. That's all you can ask for.
It is all you can ask for. I remember coming away from the game just not even happy, just fucking relieved. Yeah. Because when it goes into the golden goal, like, they could get a fluke goal and beat us here. And we don't get the chance to restart the game and go and try and equalize or anything. So the whole crowd is on edge here. And then the wheels start to come off for them. Obviously, Magno gets sent off for the late tackle on, I think, Marcus Babel on halfway. And then Carmona gets sent off for dragging down Vladdy, which leads to the free kick that Gary Mack puts in. And the funniest thing is, like, the Gary Mack free kick is a poor free kick. He underhits it massively. And if Gelly just leaves it alone, the keeper comes out and gets it with no Liverpool player in the vicinity. Like, there's no Liverpool player within 2 to 3 yards of the ball as it's flicked into the net. It's a bad free kick by Gary Mack. But it was kind of fitting that that's how we won the day, because Gerrard scores a really good goal in this final. Fowler scores a really good goal in this final. Owen would have scored a really good goal, but was dragged down, and obviously there was the Gary Mack penalty as a result of that. The Babel one, you could say, was maybe bad defending, but all of their goals are dreadful from our point of view. Like, Alonso's in a mile of space, and he's up against, we've got 4 defenders on the pitch that are all well over 6 foot. Carragher's the short of them, and he's like 6'1", 6'2". The 2 Moreno goals, the first one's a great header because he has to kind of head it kind of backwards, but it's a great header. But he's in miles of space with nobody around him in our penalty area, and you're wondering what's happened. Harry mentioned the second Moreno goal, which is a bobbling free kick that goes basically centre of the goal, but Westervel's too busy giving out to the wall to bother trying to save the shot. And then Jordi Cruyff scoring a header. Stevie Gerrard not covering himself in glory with his man marking on the corner, and Westerveld obviously making a bit of a hames of things there as well. So, you know, you felt like we deserved to win the game. So for us to win the game on a shitty goal was really nice. And it was like, this was, like I said, this was the game that put us back on the map in Europe. This got us back to, you know, not the mountain top, but certainly one of the secondary peaks of the mountain. And this is the springboard from which 2005 happens, because this is the European campaign that hardens Sami Hyypiä, that hardens Jamie Carragher, that hardens Steven Gerrard. This is the European campaign that gives them the nous and the experience of what it takes to go deep in Europe and maintain a solid presence in the league and the cups, and be able to spread yourself across the competitions, be able to come from behind, be able to overcome adversity. Without Jed and the foundations he built at Liverpool, Rafa Benitez's era is probably a damp squib. It doesn't include the European Cup in 2005. It just doesn't, because like Didi Hamann, another key part of that European Cup team, there's 4 starters in this game who started in that European Cup final. Vladi Schmitzer comes off the bench, as he would 4 years later, to play a fairly important role. Like, this is the foundation of that Liverpool team in 2005. And obviously it was Jed getting Liverpool into the Champions League in the 2004 league season that gave us the ability to play in that European Cup final. And it always strikes me that when people talk about the great Liverpool managers, Houllier is always overlooked. And for me, because of what he did and because of the trophies he won and how he turned the culture of the club around from the Spice Boys era of Roy Evans. And by the way, just in case anyone's unaware of this, this is a random fact of the day. That Liverpool team, the white suits, they weren't called the Spice Boys at the time, because that FA Cup final took place 5 months before the Spice Girls released their first single. So they were retrospectively called the Spice Boys. But Houllier took that culture out of the club and put in a culture of winning. And that culture of winning lasted through his era, through Rafa's era, before Hodgson came in and just butchered the whole thing. I would have Jed above Rafa on my list of Liverpool managers. I know Rafa won a European Cup, and I'll always be grateful to him for that. But he doesn't do it without Houllier. And I think there's a reason why certain players Carragher, Gerrard, probably the two most important players of both managers' era. If we take their two eras as one time span, I think if they were asked to pick a manager, I think they'd both pick Jed. I think he made both of them into the players that Rafa was able to build his team around. And never has a man deserved the success that we had that season more than him, because he put up with a lot of shit. Because the football wasn't great to watch or anything like that, but he knew how to win. And he wasn't afraid to make the big decisions. And obviously, as fans, we didn't agree with a lot of them. We didn't agree with replacing Fowler in the team. We didn't agree with selling Fowler a year later either. And yet he was big enough to do it and take the flak. And yeah, Jed, may he rest in peace, is someone that we should all be very, very thankful that we had in our lives for, the 6 years he was at Liverpool.
Yeah, transformative man in the club's history for sure. And Harry, to finish with you then, any takeaways for you from this remarkable match of great significance in the history of the club?
Yeah, just echoing a lot of what Dave said there around. Yeah, I mean, obviously when I first watched it, it was nowhere near as apparent to me. Sort of the significance of bringing a winning culture back into the club. The fact that there'd obviously been a period of more sort of poor form in the league and not winning competitions for a number of years, sort of since the glory days. So it wasn't as sort of prescient to me, but of course, I think Houllier does deserve a huge amount of credit for bringing back that winning culture to the club. A treble, any way you want to put it, is a historic achievement, and I think the way in which it was achieved made it feel even more sort of important. And not only the players that he brought in, but I'd agree with Dave on that he always struck me as a manager who wasn't afraid to make decisions that he thought wouldn't necessarily be agreed with or wouldn't be the most popular, because that was what needed to be done to get this ship to turn the corner after the few years that it had and some of the more bad sort of habits that perhaps crept into the dressing room. So yeah, that on Houllier himself, and I think he's a really important figure in the club's history and the journey that the club has been on ever since him, to be honest, both in embracing different kinds of players, but also embracing different ways to win in a more modern approach. In the game itself, just had me a lot of fond memories of seeing players in their young days just emerging, obviously around sort of Stevie and a few others there, some cult heroes that I obviously loved. I think I've already mentioned in Babel and Hupia and Gary Mack, for example. And then I think it just reminded me of I've watched a number of games since then, even though I was very young when I first watched that season. Not routine, that's a bit disrespectful, but games where you feel like we're the better team here, we should be able to, especially when a couple goals ahead, just shut up shop. And I've watched games like that in numerous different locations with numerous different people, and the sheer commitment of this Liverpool team up until sort of quite recently, but still recently, to making those games as nerve-wracking as possible has never left me, to be honest. And I long for the day where we have a really, really boring, controlled 2-0 cup final success or whatever, because we've dealt with heroic performances where we lose, or like performances against teams where we should easily beat them, where we have to end up sort of doing it on penalties or something like that. And this was just one of those examples, I think, where with the greatest respect in the world, Alaves should not be causing us the issues that they ended up doing, but it just shows you sort of what can happen in cup competitions. But yeah, wonderful trophy to lift at the end of it, and capped a wonderful season.
You know what? I think we will finish on that particular note. Dave, I know we've been sort of discussing and suggesting in advance at the end of the show what we're going to do in the next one. I had a thought. Perhaps we could pick 2 or 3 and let people vote on what one is the next one. What do you reckon? We'll do a poll or something like that.
That sounds like a good idea.
So we'll pick a few out of a hat and we'll let listeners make the call on it for the next one. And I want to thank Dave and Harry for being so eloquent about this particular game and taking the time to look back over it so that we could do this show for you. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, a little slice of the past. That's what Raw Retro is all about. I've been Trev Downey. You heard Dave Hendrick and Hari Sethi. Guy Drinkle is producing. And we'll be back with the next one very soon.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.